You've probably heard the term toxic masculinity, but you may not realize that it's not just an insult thrown around by SJW feminazis like myself. It's something that is actually regularly studied by psychologists and sociologists who are examining how and why men in our society behave the way they do. So today I want to talk about one such study that was published last month in the journal Personality and Social Psychology Bulletin. Be a Man, the Role of Social Pressure in Eliciting Men's Aggressive Cognition. Previous research has shown that men tend to respond with aggression when they feel that their masculinity is being threatened. But hashtag not all men. And no women, by the way. Studies show women don't show any aggression when you threaten their femininity. And we can see this in our current situation when Americans decided to code face masks and hand washing as feminine and weak in the midst of a deadly pandemic. Many men were able to ignore that ridiculousness and follow the advice of medical professionals. But many other men had complete and total crybaby breakdowns when asked to wear masks in grocery stores, screaming at hourly workers.
Leave me alone! Stop touching me! Don't touch me! Get away from me! Get away from me! No, you need to listen to me.
I'm not touching you.
The hell you're not!
You need to leave right now.
Laying down on the floor like a toddler. Needing to be physically removed from a store by their sons, causing them to audibly fart.
People won't learn. These people won't learn. You're a bunch of idiots wearing masks. You know it's not real. Look at you fools. You got a fucking doily on your face, you retard. You look like you fucking got it off your mom's countertop. You feel better now? You look like an idiot. You're the child trying to make you wear a mask. Shut up. Shut up, man. Yelling at people. You're a dork. Look at you, you giant fucking dork. What are you gonna do? Boy, come outside. Come outside and show me how tough you are. Here we go. Fucking little. I'll beat that fucking mask off your face like a fucking retard. Fucking pussies. You're a bunch of pussies wearing masks. Loser.
And this guy.
You're 6 feet away from you.
You're harassing me.
I'm not harassing you. You are infecting us. You're coming close to me. You're coming close to me.
Back off! Threaten me again! Back the fuck up or your fucking phone down!
Literally screaming, "I feel threatened," in case it wasn't super clear that wearing a mask is threatening this man's masculinity. So for this latest study, researchers decided to try to figure out why many men get so aggressive when you threaten their masculinity and why some men don't really seem to mind at all. Their hypothesis was that there are two different reasons why a man might behave in a stereotypically masculine way. One reason is that he might do that because he genuinely wants to, like he feels that's who he is. But the other reason is that he might be doing that because society expects him to. And men in that latter group who behave in a stereotypically masculine way because they're looking to impress the people around them are more fragile. And so when someone or something threatens that identity that they've built, they're more likely to get upset and lash out with another stereotypically masculine trait, aggression. And that is, in fact, what these researchers found. They surveyed about 200 men and women, asking them to think about when they were growing up and describe what the people around them at that time expected from a real man or a real woman. And then they asked the subjects questions to learn if they tried to live up to that ideal and whether they felt that that was their true identity or whether they are basically putting on a show for the people around them. At this point, I will pause to say that if you are wondering how this all relates to people who are transgender or non-binary, or who think they might be transgender or non-binary? The answer is, I don't really know. The authors don't discuss it too much, except for to point out that this research is specifically looking at presumably cisgender men and women who conform to gender stereotypes. And the results that they got might actually be thrown off if a significant number of their subjects are in fact non-conforming. They didn't really give non-conforming subjects a way to really clearly signal their nonconformity, which in my opinion makes these results a little less rigorous. So I would love to see someone do all of this a little bit different by exploring that aspect of those of us who don't necessarily conform to the gender stereotypes that we grew up with. Anyway, the researchers pitched all of this to the subjects as if it was a kind of memory and personality test. And at the end, they gave the subjects their score and explained that either their score was average for their gender or extremely below average for their gender. Like, men did way better than you on this test. They then wanted to detect how shameful the subjects felt about their low scores. So they decided to ask the subjects if they would be allowed to publish their score with the subject's name attached. So mean. So the below average among men results were the stimulus that they were hoping would threaten their subjects' masculinity. To figure out if the subjects would respond with aggression, they then followed that up by giving them an aggressive cognition test, which previous studies have linked to aggressive behavior. What they did was they showed the subjects words that had some of the letters blanked out, and they asked them to fill in the blanks. But the blanks are spaced in such a way that it could be several different words. The idea is that if you are in a worked up, aggressive state, you're more likely to immediately think of aggressive words. So, for instance, GU blank could be gum or gun. KI blank blank could be kiss or kill or kick. Blank IGHT could be fight or night. You get the idea. And yes, they found that their hypothesis held up. Men who based their masculinity on what society expected of them were more likely to respond with aggression when their masculinity was threatened. Men who were more likely to agree with the statement, "In general, I present myself like the man I described because I want others' acceptance and approval," and disagree with, "It brings me pleasure if I behave like the man I described," or "I enjoy acting like the man I described," those were the guys that were more likely to be aggressive when threatened. In a follow-up test, they found that younger men were also more likely to be aggressive because they are more likely to look outward for guidance on how they should behave and about who they are. So they are unsecure about those things and they don't really know what makes them happy. And so they're more likely to be aggressive when their masculinity is threatened. Men who didn't care about society's expectations of their gender expression weren't aggressive when they were told that they weren't as good as other men. And women didn't get aggressive regardless of whether their femininity was internal or externally motivated. The researchers didn't really talk about that too much since it wasn't a surprising finding. Past research has shown the same thing. But I would love to see some research on whether or not women react in some other way. Like, aggression is a stereotypically male response, so it makes sense that that's how wannabe manly men would react to being told that they're not manly enough. And it makes sense that a woman would act out in a different way if she had a fragile hold on her feminine identity, which is then threatened. Would she display aggression, but in a different, more socially acceptable way for women? Or would she express another feeling, another emotion, like being sad, that's more socially acceptable for women? There are a lot of possibilities besides, well, women just don't really care if you threaten their femininity. There are a lot of other interesting findings lurking in this study, and the researchers point out that several of these deserve their own study. For instance, they found that the average age when men remembered learning what a real man is was about 11 years old. So they suggest future research could use that as a launch point to begin to trace the developmental pathways of masculine social pressure that is antecedent to aggressive threat responding in younger adult men. They also found that when they asked people to describe their early understanding of what a real man or a real woman is, women described a stereotypically traditional or restricted woman 82% of the time, saying things like, oh, being a real woman meant to be nurturing and caring. While strength was also required, it was more emotional than physical. And 18% of women described a progressive woman, like to be a woman is to balance work ambitions with life and family goals, such as watching your kids grow up. But for men, 100% of subjects described a traditional restrictive definition of what a real man should be. Like, in today's society, to be a man means that you are tough and resilient. You're expected not to cry when something happens, but rather take charge and do something about making it better. All of these examples, honestly, reading them one after the other, it made me want to cry. Probably because I'm a woman and I'm allowed to cry. One subject said that to be a man meant to never cry, to never show emotion, to bring physical harm to anyone who crossed you or your family, to stand up for what you believe in. And then there was this poor guy. I was playing baseball and was hit by a pitch. My coach, who was a jerk, kept screaming at me to be a man about it and to walk to first base. Basically, he was insinuating that I wasn't tough. Aside from the evidence that this study gives us that says insecure men are more likely to lash out with aggression when their fragile masculinity is threatened, it's really telling that apparently, according to these responses, we seem to be making some progress with telling little girls that they can be more than just a baby factory, but not with telling little boys that they're allowed to have emotions rather than anger. Like, they're allowed to cry. Toxic, fragile masculinity is a feminist issue, but it negatively affects everyone who comes into contact with it, male or female. A person who says they behave in a certain way because I want people to like me, but don't necessarily agree that I enjoy acting like the man I described, that is a sad person. And reacting with aggression when their gender identity is threatened endangers everyone around them. In fact, the researchers themselves pointed out that some of the men in their study who they gave artificially low scores to actually physically threatened them with violence. Like, the male subjects threatened the scientists. That's how insecure they were. That's how fragile their masculinity was. The researchers write that they hope future studies consider how the social pressure identified here may be related to other male-specific outcomes, particularly instances of political aggression that endanger marginalized and underrepresented groups. Like, this is a real serious issue. A lot of anger and violence stems from this kind of fragile masculinity. It's all extremely sad, except for the news that apparently it is possible for a man to be a stereotypical masculine man. And so long as that man is happy, fulfilled, and comfortable with who he is, he won't lash out when he sees another man wearing makeup, or when he has to change his baby's diapers, or when he's expected to practice basic hygiene, like washing his hands and wearing a mask during a pandemic.
You're coming for